Pigeons 420. Mr. Grow It. And Rob from Cannabis Lifestyle TV. From the Stash Podcast.
From the Stash Podcast, it's your boy Rob from CLtv, Pigeons 420, and Mr. Grow It, also known as Chris, the Grummies over here.
Hey,
what up, boys?
What's up? Living the dream, gentlemen. I'm good.
Vida Loca,
good.
Man.
Chris,
back
how you doing?
for another episode.
That's right. Here we go.
Feeling
Here
good.
we go. And another great one in the books for us as well. One I think that we're all going to have a little bit to add to this one because we're all in three different areas. And I think we're going to have three different kind of perspectives and legalities to discuss. But what are we talking about today?
Talking about the caregiver system, or becoming a caregiver and having patience. And this is for the medical people. Now, some states are just, or some areas are just rec. Totally, I get that. But other places have medical programs. And within those medical programs, they have these caregiver systems. And essentially, the caregiver is the person who will cultivate the plants for the patient being the person who consumes on the medical side. So some states have very open medical programs. Other states are more restrictive, and some don't have any sort of caregiver patient program at all. And how they go about it and how a person will go about getting into that is different. I know early on in Michigan, it was like a career for some people. You could have your overages being, donated to the dispensaries, and they would give you donations for that in terms of cash. And that was a career for a lot of people. And some people still are able to do it, but it's not what it used to be. And I think that's where it was cool and it was open, and it seemed like, holy shit, I can't believe I can legally do this. I can be a grower. I can have 5 patients here in Michigan, 5 patients, 12 plants per patient. And you're able to just give them 2.5 Z's per month or per harvest. And so at that point, that's a taboo one we'll talk about later on what you give them. But at that point, people would have so much extra. So the dispo is where they would go, or black market. And it became a thriving thing here in Michigan. And I knew so many people who were caregivers and would just be buying people cards. They'd have like this old random person as their patient who doesn't even care. It's like, oh, I'll be your patient. And it was an industry. And I think that's where it may have turned a little, and it got abused a little, and they ended up pushing things. But when I talk to people about the caregiver system, it's so different here than what it is in other states, it's in other areas. How does it, for keeping it in the States, Chris, how's it over there in Nevada?
Man, what you're talking to me about is all foreign. In my state, you can't grow as a caregiver. So it's basically caregivers, first of all, what is a caregiver? Someone who is in charge of taking care of a patient who suffers from a chronic medical condition. That's kind of how they describe it here in my state. So it can be anybody as long as they're over the age of 18 and the medical patient's physician approves of that person. So that's kind of a big thing here. Only one caregiver is allowed per patient. Caregivers are allowed to. What's that?
Even felons can be caregivers there?
Doesn't say anything against that. Yeah, everything I read about that, it didn't say anything against that. Caregivers are allowed to purchase medicinal cannabis on patient's behalf, right? So they can go into a dispensary, they've got their caregiver card or whatever, some sort of identification that they're a caregiver. They're allowed to purchase on a medical aspect of it. In my particular state, as a medical patient, you can buy up to 2.5 ounces per, I forget what it is, a 30-day period or a week period, a 2-week period, whatever it is, but it's in a certain time frame. But they have to be registered with the state. So basically, when you're a medical patient and you apply for it, it's like a $25 application fee, then $75 for the year. You list on the application who your caregiver is going to be. And for me, when I was with my physician, I filled out the form right then and there. I didn't have a caregiver, but the physician, again, would have to approve that caregiver. So that would be done at that point. And then it goes to the state registry program, Nevada Department of Health and Human Services, Nevada Division of Public and Behavioral Health. So those are the ones that kind of handle it in my state. And each state is different. It varies from state to state. And one thing before we move on is I just want to mention that if somebody is wondering what the laws are in their state for caregivers, or even what the laws are for cultivation, medical or recreational, a great resource is NORML website, NORML.org. go there. You can actually, right on the top bar, it says state laws. You click on that, it shows the map of all the states, even includes Guam, Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico. And you can click on that and find out all the details about what the state laws are. So highly recommend going to that. I actually went to that website before I even came onto this podcast, so I could make sure that I'm relaying some accurate information. But the laws are always changing, so somebody could watch this video a year from now, 2 years from now, and things could be different. So I always recommend going to that website to get the most up-to-date. They're pretty up-to-date when it comes to that avenue. But it's completely different from my state to your state, Rob. It seems like it doesn't say anything in my state about growing at all. And the fact that I can only have one patient under you as a caregiver, it sounds like in your state you can have 5 more than that, right?
5, and you could grow a shitload of fucking plants, man. It's insane. And then you can carry more. So per card you have, you can carry 2.5 ounces on you. So that was for me back in the day. That was the biggest thing. So I'm like, I never just have 2.5 Z's on me. So I was like, I gotta have a patient. And I was very fortunate that my mom and my dad right away were my patients. So, you know, and they live in separate areas, so it worked out. I was like, hey, I gotta grow here, grow there, It worked. But so in Canada, it's got to be in the ballpark.
It's very similar. Yeah, it's very similar. We can grow for our patients. And the rules that are applied to those that are growing on their own would just apply to applies the same to as someone who's growing for somebody else. So if somebody has a prescription for, say, myself is 6 grams and I can do 32 plants. So if someone else has 6 grams, I could also grow 32 plants. Like we could match their prescription. There are limits to which how much product you can store and maintain on your person at any given time. It does vary from province to province as well. But typically speaking, we're talking large amounts, and that's the freedom that you get. Like it's somewhere up in the ballpark of like equivalent of 3 pounds worth of, if we're for traveling, if you're going between provinces, like you can pack to go kind of thing, you know. But bags, there is like a 30 hockey bags, yeah, right. There is like a I believe there's like a 30 gram personal limit. So if I'm walking to and fro, you can only have like 30 grams on you at any given time. Now, as Chris mentioned, these laws can change so fast, especially as you see more and more states / provinces legalizing and taking different routes as they carve out their own cannabis path, you know, and economy. But I think what's important to note is if you have the opportunity to support a grower or somebody local that can be your designated producer, I think that's 100% the way to go. You're going to have access to, most of the time you have access to the process in terms of seeing it as it grows. You'll know who's putting the time and the effort in. It's a great idea rather than being subject to a producer.
Well, I grow for patients, and I'll grow a couple cultivars that I don't personally love, but for the patient, you know. And now I have less patients. I just have my mom and my dad, but they both do have their own ailments, you know. So my mom dealing with heavy anxiety, having carpal tunnel, arthritis in her hands. She's always doing accounting work too, so she's sore. So I'm like, all right, I need to have something that's really going to help with the pain and the anxiety in that sense, but also something she likes to smoke and taste well, 'cause she smokes as much as I do. And then my dad, he's, you know, now like 3.5 months sober from drinking, so he's just realizing what he likes for certain particular cultivars. Before, bud is bud is bud. He didn't care. Now it's like certain ones give him, he's like, I feel kind of stressed when I smoke that one, or like this one made me feel sleepy, or this and that. And I'm like, yeah, see? So now I'm trying to find the right one for him. And I see some caregivers doing it right in that sense, where it's like they're taking care of their patient. They're making sure that they only keep on what's going to help them. They grow it properly. You know, I'm not going to argue between organic or mineral-based there. I don't think there's any ethical argument there. Some people will think, only clean organic meds for my cancer patients. It's like, yeah, there's no science that says that these, unless there's no heavy metals that are in it, unless you're taking care of your plant properly, there's no science there. But what I really think is the biggest argument is taking care of the patient. I know too many people who just do it as an industry, and they're like, all right, I got 5 patients. Fucking, they're paying me X amount for my shit. I'm already killing them, trapping. It's like, what, motherfucker? No, take care of your patients. Take care of your people. If you got somebody who's got a real ailment, there's no reason they're paying you top dollar for their meds.
Right.
If anything, have them come over and help you trim. Have them come over and, if they can physically, have them help you grow a little bit or kick in a little bit. There's a service fee. I completely understand it's not free, but when you're looking at anybody, like, you got to be real stupid. I don't care. Don't fucking lie to me. Chat and comments. I go see someone's already lying to me on my phone. If you got a scenario where you're growing that much, do you think you're running out of meds after that 2.5 Z's goes to your patients? Do you think you don't have extra? You think it's not going elsewhere? There's a lot more lucrative side for the caregiver than there is for the patient, regardless. Even if it's like, oh, I'm getting free bud. Free 2.5 ounces off of 12 plants. 12 plants. So, and that's from Michigan here. And people will argue with me all the time, like, no, but caregiver this. I've been a caregiver. Don't fucking tell me. I've done it for a decade. Like, I know. I get way more than 2.5 ounces from 12 plants. So if all I have to do is give it to that patient, now I can grow 12 more plants. That's huge for me because I smoke a lot. Back when I could deal with dispensaries, I had a lot of overages. It was huge, and it was an industry, but it got exploited. And I feel like not just from the caregiver, but from the corporate industry. As recreational comes along and legalization sweeps the nation, there is less of a need for caregivers for some people. And it's not real. That's bullshit. But they think it's not. When there's more dispensaries and there's more access to it, people aren't renewing their medical cards constantly. So like, well, I can grow 12 plants anyway here in Michigan. Why do I need my medical card? Well, your rights, for one. For two, it's killing a program. You're going to look at like Oregon, I know, and a lot of places, the people who are renewing their cards is dwindling down to nothing. Because it's like, why would I spend more money when I already can grow legally and I already can smoke it? Like, what's the point?
Well, the idea for me was there's so many more benefits to being legal. You know, it's like being medical. Rather than just recreational, because that was a question that I kind of, now we're a little off topic, but that's a question that I kind of tossed around myself was, do I maintain a medical prescription, which costs money, or do I just fall into the legal system? But
correct.
The medical side of things is so much more forgiving in terms of the amount that I can possess at any given time, the amount that I can have in my home, even the amount I can grow in the province that I'm at. Legally, we can't even grow,
or
unless you're medical, right? Unless you're medical.
Yeah, it's more strict there.
What
if you get pulled over there? What is the law for DUIs or for operating while intoxicated? Medical versus recreational.
Yeah, cannabis. Well, see, it's crazy. Like, it's not necessarily. Driving while weed isn't really a thing here. You know,
God,
it's like
Canada, thank you, Canada.
If you're driving like an idiot, that's reckless driving, careless driving. You can frame that up to anything. You know what I mean? But driving while weed is just not really a thing.
Driving while weed, I love that. In Michigan here, it was, I believe, a nanogram. If you had recreational side, if you got pulled over and they found in your blood, because they do a blood test, and I think it was a nanogram of THC in your system, you can get an OWI. If you have a medical card, and they've changed the laws, luckily they pushed it now, but and they probably changed next. Someone's going to watch this in a year and be like, it's different now.
Right,
but
and it will. They'll
now
watch this
your medical card, they'd have to prove that is somehow fucking up your driving. Is this really affecting your driving in a negative way? And there's no way to really prove that. So most times those cases would be thrown out. The recreational side, you've got no backing, no nothing. Even when it comes down to like parenting and cannabis, like we talked about before, CPS is going to be a lot harsher on some stoner compared to the medical patient. I've seen it firsthand, where the guy who's just growing, who's partying, and it is whatever, there's just, they're on him like flies on shit. And he's honestly the more up and up guy than the one who's got his medical card. There's lawyers involved, there's rights, there's this, there's that, you're infringing, you're discriminating. And I think that's because it's medical. There's a whole different, stigma really attached to that, where it's like, hey, this is, Beth Ann who's sick and she had leukemia and helped her with that. And here's fucking Rob the stoner who just gets high and smokes blunts with tobacco wrapped around it, drinks Coronas at night and plays video games. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's less of a safety net for you in that sense. So I think that's where it is beneficial to keep it. But financially, it's more lucrative not to for a lot of people. They're like, fuck it, I'd rather just grow my plants for free.
Right.
Why am I going to pay? Right. But that's in Michigan.
And to somehow tie this back into
caregiving,
patients and caregiving. Yeah. There are people that can't get into it on their own. Like no matter what the case is, whether you're in a position of disability where you can't, like, you know, growing weed is not an easy task in terms of physical work. You know, it is a lot of physical work, bending over, lifting watering cans, lifting the pots, moving, shifting, you know, it's a lot of work. And there's definitely a need for patients for caregivers. I myself, I've never been a caregiver. I don't think I could. I don't want the responsibility of somebody's medication on my hands. I'm just some ignorant, you know, just ill-experienced guy who's growing weed. And it's like the last thing that I need is to be peddling in someone else's medication.
But
you
see,
know
you're
what I
like
mean?
10 steps ahead of the next. Like if your neighbor, or prime example, if your wife said, "Hey, go buy a fucking Spider Farmer tent." There you go. So I'm my mom's caregiver. My mom can grow plants, but she's busy.
Right.
And my dad, he struggled. That's why.
But the thing is that like I understand that concept, and I think in a way, yeah, we are caregivers in that sense. Because my wife has no real hands-on experience with what goes on in the garden, but benefits very highly from my work. However, my work has evolved with us. You know, it's like I've kind of gotten to know her and what she responds to and what calms her. And the reality is if I had someone come to me and say, "Pigeons, I'm suffering from depression and anxiety and I got a nervous twitch," and I would say, "Okay,
go to the doctor."
Yeah. Like I don't know, you know what I mean? I don't know what, unless they came to me and said I respond very well to a cookies or an AK-47, I don't know, or a heavy sativa, or or something with like a limonene or some kind of terpene or cannabinoid that really resonates with their ailments. I would be lost. I'd be lost.
Yeah, well, there's a fine line there, right? You're not a doctor, right? So like if they're asking you about medical conditions and what could potentially help you, I think legally you have to refer them over to a doctor at that point. For a specific condition, what their recommendation would be to heal that. But you guys talking about the caregiver being able to grow for the patient. I'm really surprised that in my particular state, that's not a thing. And I'm sure there's other states across the U.S. where the caregiver can't grow for the patient. And what if the patient isn't able to physically grow on their own, and the strain that they are, or cultivar that they need for their ailment, for their issue, it isn't available in the dispensary? And kind of going into the medical laws in my state, I'm actually only able to grow as a medical patient if the strain is not available in a local dispensary. So that's one of the things that kind of like the loophole, I guess you could say, is I have to grow strains that aren't available that will help with my medical condition. Now, if the person has a medical condition they can't physically grow and it's not available in the dispensary, what do? The caregiver, it doesn't say anything about the caregiver being able to grow for them, which is kind of crazy. So I'd like to see some change there. But going back to kind of what Pigeons said about growing as a caregiver, and how you should support your caregivers, I kind of have a question for you guys. So say you're a medical patient, right, and you want to support your caregiver, you want to go through a caregiver. Testing is a big thing in my state, and I know it's a big thing in a lot of states, right? They got to test for mold, microbial tests, they've got heavy metal testing, all that stuff. Dispensaries go through that. They can't put anything on the shelf unless it's been through testing. Is that the same standards for caregivers going to medical patients? Or is there no testing that needs to be done?
There'd be no testing, and I think that would be,
depends on the person.
Immediately, just the way you say it, it's like, that is very fishy. But I think what's important though is you have a choice, right? Do you take the government subsidized, over treated because there's a lot of processes that are involved, like radiation, for example, like irradiating bud. That's a thing, and it happens on a mass scale. Yeah.
Say what?
Yeah. One of the selling points, I'll digress, remember what my point was.
Let's do it.
One of the selling points to the weed that I just bought the other day was that they fill it with nitrogen. It's nitrogen-filled containers to maintain freshness. And I was like, okay.
No, that makes sense.
Like,
That's
I understand,
innovative.
like, I breathe in a lot of nitrogen. But, fuck, like, that just, as a guy who doesn't, like, I have a very specialized and very well-formed, very technical tinfoil hat, okay? And when I hear that you fucking, when you tell me that there's nitrogen and there's radiation and like, no. But anyways, you have a choice. Do you take the government irradiated bud that's tested for what Lord only knows, or do you take the choice of going locally and purchasing it from somebody who may or may not have a reputation to the source? I think the same thing can be applied to like a farmer's market. You know what I mean? When you go to a farmer's market, the vegetables that you're getting, the fruits, the baking, that stuff hasn't been tested. It hasn't been regulated. The bakeries weren't monitored by health and safety regulatory bodies. You know, so
to some extent, not FDA though. Like they're not testing the bread each batch.
You're making a trade, right? So it's like. But yeah, I guess if you didn't know where you were getting your source of weed from,
well, they play
you may
devil's
want to pick
advocate.
the caregiver's brain on what they
sure.
how they grow.
Homework would be definitely
obviously inspect the cannabis final product, right? Break it open, make sure there is no bud rot in there, or mold in there, right? Yeah, so you definitely got to do your due diligence because
here in Michigan we've got. I guess, man, I don't know. Maybe I got a good circle, but a lot of people I know test their shit. They get it tested. A lot of people do. So it's like crazy. He's like, no, caregivers will. It's like, a lot of them do. It's a bragging right to say, oh, this percentage, that percentage, this percent. You know what I'm saying? Like that's where a lot of people do it here because there's so many fucking caregivers.
So there are different tests. You might be you're talking about what THC and terpene type tests.
Yeah, and they'll go do those tests. But a lot of times these companies like Iron Labs, which I don't have a lot of great things to say about them anymore because they've gotten into some scandals. But a lot of us caregivers used to use them, and you can pay for the basic test of like your cannabinoid test, but you can also do for your heavy metals and contaminants too. And it's not that much money. It's more about having to give up the product that sucked. But again, for 12 plants per patient, it wasn't that big a deal for most of us at that time. But I still know a lot of people who get it tested, but more in the aspect of cannabinoid content. So that's where I think my mind was going toward.
Yeah.
So I've never seen, it's clean, but I've never seen a dispensary say 0 GM. You know what I'm saying? Like how you see from low sodium, 0 GMOs. They're not like tested with 0 heavy metals or you know what I'm saying?
Well, that's a base requirement.
Right? Yeah, it's like the basic knowledge. But then you've got microbe testing. So like here in Michigan, it's totally different where you can't have. They're worried about mold and things like that. They treat it like tobacco heavily. So there's not many organic growers here at all. Everybody's doing hydroponic or aeroponic for the most part. And the caregivers aren't. And that's where the argument came in to stop caregivers from dealing with the dispensaries is these guys were like, hey, it's not clean meds. It's hit or miss. Some people are, some people aren't. The testing facilities they use aren't legit, even though they also used Iron Labs. It just is pretty fucked up because they generalized it and they said, well, these 5 caregivers here had dirty meds, but then all these other ones, like fuck all these other ones who get tested at the same facilities that we do and pay the same prices. The difference is they paid all the money for licensing and the zoning and regulations, and so they felt entitled to it. And like we're providing clean, safe meds. These guys aren't. And that's Green Peak who did that. We talked about them before. Fuck them. And a lot of us caregivers do test our shit. So it was like, are you fucking serious? What? And a lot of the people I know grow organically that dealt with the dispensaries. So it was another thing where I'm like, how is this? Heavy metals? What the fuck you talking about? Like they may have jammed heavy metal on the way there, but I doubt it was anything that like it. So the generalization of us, the caregivers, it's become a stigmatized, like the criminals in the thing. I'm like, what? These guys are good. No one's harming anyone. There's no poison.
Well, the thing is just that even the program that you're describing, it doesn't sound like that's how Like, of course, there's going to be some bad actors in terms of trying to manipulate the system and stuff, but it is so readily available to grow your own here and it's relatively easy to get your own prescription. To like, you know, it's relatively easy if you have the money. Like, excuse me, if you've got the few $100 to pay for the prescription, which is unfortunate in a public healthcare system, but that's the way it should be with cannabis. You have a lot of freedoms. You know, 6 grams, 30 some plants. You know, that's a lot. Anyone can do that. Now, the caregiver program would be like, I just think we have a lot less people using the caregiving program because I feel like there's just more access to it.
Yeah. Well, and then also with the thing there is it's medical, right? Well, why doesn't your insurance cover it? Why can't you pay your caregiver with your medical card or with your insurance card? We're
starting. You can now get cannabis covered on your insurance.
Hell yeah, Canada.
That's because it's federally legal in Canada.
Right.
It's not federally
Makes
legal.
Now, and also keep in mind, though, it's federally legal, but private industries can do whatever the fuck they want, right? But we do have public healthcare system, or public healthcare and public insurance. So yeah, we are finding now that you are able to. I get it's a tax write-off for myself. Any purchase towards medical is an entire tax write-off. And it's been incredible. It is. It's an incredible feeling walking in there with butane receipts and, you know, bong receipts. And I'm just like, it's all accessories to the cause, man. And I feel like anyone else, I should have access. I should be entitled to have my, you know, if for example, I had, you know, maybe it's not the greatest correlation, but you know, if somebody has like respiratory issues or leg like physical issues, anything that you purchase to assist with those issues is going to be a write-off. You know, if you need one of those chairs that ride you up your stairs, that's a write-off because you need it for your medical condition. It is no different than needing to get a bong or, well, under the law. Okay, it's a little different.
It's a little bit. But it's in the ballpark. It's in the ballpark.
But it's an accessory to my medical. It's kind of, when you say it like that, it doesn't quite come off as right, but I knew that wasn't the right correlation when I started. But anyways, that's my point. It's a medical expense, and it's a write-off. So as would be a caregiver.
Would you consider, if you could grow for people, would you consider being a caregiver? Like maybe for your your roommate's not really smoking, right?
Talking to me?
Yeah, you're Chris, right?
Yeah,
Mr. Grow It. I apologize. Mr. Grow It.
You guys are talking over each other.
I know, sorry. We do that. That's why we do that with each other.
So there's not really a benefit to being a caregiver in my particular state.
Well, if you could grow for people.
Grow it and like, I mean, what would I do? Would I sell it and then I keep the profits and stuff like that? I mean, yeah, if there was something along those lines, I'd consider it. But right now, it's just there's one caregiver per medical patient, and you know, one patient per caregiver type thing. So it's not like I would be able to grow for a wide amount of people. If that was an option and there was some sort of, you know, profit or. I mean, there wouldn't even need to be profit, you know. If I knew a handful of people or if I knew some people who had a medical condition, sure, I'd definitely grow for them and help them out and provide to them for free or whatever. Like, that's no problem because I do have the capacity. I am able to physically grow plants and stuff like that. So if that was an option, sure, I'd definitely consider it and probably do it. My question for you guys, I think we kind of briefly talked about it, but what do you actually need to do to become a caregiver in your state? You know, my state, I already kind of mentioned what it was. You have to be at least 18 years old, physician's approval, and that's kind of pretty much it. Do you guys have to pay a fee to be in there? And do you have to have a certain number of patients that you provide for, and so on and so forth, or what?
It's $15 per caregiver. Maybe it's $30 now, but it's a 2-year card, so it's not much. But anybody who's not a felon who's over 21 can be a caregiver. So if you got a felony, you can't be a caregiver. You can be a patient, but you can't be a caregiver. So it's a little different. But the fee is nothing. It's minimal. You know, before recreational came around for medical, you'd be paying about like $250, maybe $300 with your appointment and your fee to the state. So that was where it was less attractive for some people. Now it's cheap. They've dropped the price, and it's for 2 years. I think it's like $120 or $130. It's pretty cheap. But the caregiver side is still like unbelievably affordable. And if you want to be a caregiver, you know, just be able to provide the service. You don't have to be the greatest grower, but if you're a few steps ahead, then it's like, hey, I can help somebody who can't do it. You know, there's a guy in the 420 Growers Club who has his nurses. He's a quadriplegic, and he has his nurses growing for him. They're his caregivers, legitimately. And they also grow his weed. So it's like, if he had a buddy who was better than his nurses who know nothing, that he's giving all the information to, he's watching our content and then telling them what to do, then he'd have a blessing, and his life would be a lot easier. But no one's, I mean, I literally tried for a few months. I posted it in the 420 Growers Club on the website and Discord. I'm like, anybody in this area who's looking for a patient, cool guy, needs a patient. Nothing.
And so you would sell your homegrown stuff to them for whatever price you said, or how does that work?
Yeah, well, for me, I just give my shit away for free because I've got extra. So I'd give them 2.5 Z's for free, or I'd cover their expenses, their card and everything, and then give them the extra. They're not going to get like top choice buds unless they're coming to trim those top choice buds. But for fee-wise, and even still, like, the fee is nothing. It's like cost, you know, like, it's really fucking cheap. I'm not that guy out here trying to make profit off of it because that's not my source of income.
For sure.
But it makes it so my cost of growing doesn't exist. I don't have a cost to grow, you know, which is very nice. Now, you said you got no fee there, P?
No, I noticed is like when I filled out my application, it's literally a box to check. But you're filing everything through Health Canada, so the government's already got, you think it's all your information and everything. So as far as I know, of course you've got to be of legal age. I don't think like a record matters, but it's a box to check. It's a box to check.
You can take on as many patients as you want.
That's where I would have to check out, but I think at a certain point, like, your designated grower is going to be somebody at their house, right? So we have unbelievable plant limits. Like with myself, I can grow up to 32 plants. So if I took on another patient of equal size, that's 60 plants. I don't think I could even do it in my house anymore. So I think it really comes down to what you can fit in your house. Because if you're going to go outside and start like taking up more land and property, well, now you got to start getting more permits and stuff. You got to get approvals and so on and so forth. So you're entering into a different kind of realm at that point. So I'm not honestly how many I'm not sure, but I wouldn't imagine it'd be too many.
Yeah, and it's crazy when you look at, I'd have to say, the differences between where the three places that we're at and how dramatically different these caregiver systems are. I mean, it's yours and I are a lot more comparable, but even still in that sense, that's fucking crazy. 30? Fuck, they were counting
a lot of plants.
They were counting cuts at one point here in Michigan. Right. They'd count cuts, and now it's anything with roots. But even also for your weight, they're counting stems and seeds, and hopefully you don't have a bunch of seeds, but, you know, everything, all of your shit, scraps. So the restrictions have gone up and down and opened up now with people not getting the medical side more. They're like, fuck, this is revenue for us that we're losing, so let's be more lenient and let's give them a little bit more, you know? And I think until the caregiver system and the patient system is refined and done right and unified and comparable in more places, it's going to be hard to like advertise it, so to speak. It's not known. It's like a underground thing. It's like, oh shit, I can be a caregiver, have 5 fucking patients? What? And I already have 5 friends who already come to me all the time that I hook up. Like, dude, cool.
And this system isn't going to be championed in my country because home growers don't have any influence on the market in terms of benefiting the government. All these producers are registered through the government. They had to go through all the hoops and all of that, check all their boxes and go through all the regulations, and they have to pay their fees. You know what I mean? So it's like, whereas as a home grower, you're almost disconnected from that system. So the huge push for people, or from the government for people, is to go to a registered producer. Get your weed from someone who's registered. They go through the checks, they get the balances, and then that's where it comes back to that choice. Are you going through to choose government weed, or are you going to go with the El Natural
or that good shit? I think on that note, man, that kind of covers it pretty well. You got anything else to add, Chris?
Yeah, no, I just want to know in the comment section what your laws are where you live as far as caregiver. Like, we've got 3 different areas here and 3 different sets of laws that vary quite a bit in some cases. What is it like in the state you live? You know, what are the requirements to be a caregiver? Also, let us know what your medical laws are, right? Because that kind of relates pretty closely with what the caregiver laws will be, how those relate together. Drop it down in the comment section below. Love to know.
Absolutely. And if you like conversations like this, do us a favor, smash that like button. It helps Susan and YouTube know that y'all fox with us. You know what I'm saying?
With that being
said, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, rating and review. We got quite a few stacking up. Nice. I love reading those every week.
Thanks,
every
guys.
couple weeks
Appreciate
I pop in there, and
I gotta go look. I haven't even
keeps
seen
us going. It definitely keeps us going, having
Thank
that positive feedback in there. So thank you to those who have done that.
Fuck yeah. With that being said, it's your boy Rob from CLtv, Pigeons 420, and Mr. Grow It. We will see y'all next time.
Peace.